Can Ukraine achieve an absolute victory over Russia? Hello everyone. Today I'm going to briefly talk about what absolute victory means, and I hope you will appreciate why this is not a reasonable metric for judging the outcome of the war in Ukraine. I'm not surprised that reference to absolute victory is gaining traction. It hadn't been used by anybody until the RAND Corporation, an American think tank, published a problematic report titled Avoiding a Long War, U.S. Policy and the Trajectory of the Russian-Ukraine Conflict. Over the coming months, I think most of you will hear the term being used in the mainstream media by senior officials and analysts. The term comes from a book written by Reiter titled How Wars End and published in 2009. He defines an absolute victory as, to quote, the victor installing a new leadership in the defeated state, occupying or annexing the adversary's territory, or at worst annihilating the adversary's entire population. Based on that definition, it might be possible to claim Russia was and possibly still is seeking an absolute victory over Ukraine. But it is patently absurd to suggest Ukrainians are aiming for anything close to an absolute victory. Ukrainians have no plan to march on Moscow to force a regime change. They have no claims on Russian territory, and I highly doubt Ukrainians want to annihilate the Russian people. In fact, all the Ukrainians seem to want is for the Russian invaders to withdraw from illegally occupied territory. If Russia did that tomorrow, for the Ukrainians, the war would be won. So what's the issue here? Well, if you make policy proposals on the basis of a claim that an absolute victory is impossible for Ukraine, then it makes sense to accept the RAND report's recommendation that Ukraine should accept whatever terms it can get at the negotiating table. Now, I don't know whether there is any nefarious intent here to undermine Western support for Ukraine. I do wonder about the authors of the report, but its audience probably does not fully grasp the shaky reasoning on which this call for negotiation is based. Most readers probably conflate absolute victory with simply winning, in any sense. And that's just not true. In the end, the ultimate measure of victory in this war may well be an absolute victory for the Russians. But for Ukrainians, it is only a battlefield victory that matters. Ukrainians have already made it clear that their definition of victory is the deoccupation of all the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine. In the absence of a Russian withdrawal, the only option for achieving this war aim is to fight the Russians and force them out of the occupied territory. In other words, what it means to win this war is not the same for Russians and Ukrainians. Some of you might think I'm being overly sensitive about this, and I can sort of understand that. But in diplomatic circles, the exact words being used do matter a lot. For example, in a recent interview, Fiona Hill, a fairly prominent foreign affairs specialist, said that an absolute victory over Russia is not possible. And she's right. But that doesn't mean what I'm sure most people think it means, namely that a battlefield victory over Russia is not possible. Winning on the battlefield is a much lower bar, and it is something more than one expert believes the Ukrainians can achieve. So when you hear an official or analyst talk about absolute victory, just know that it means something very specific. And it doesn't mean that Ukraine can't win this war. Anyway, that's all I wanted to cover today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe if you're so inclined, and regardless, thanks for watching all the way to the end.